there. How are you? I'm Cindy Dole, and this is Home Wizards, your radio home for all things home, garden, and life improvement. This is the place where you can and will get all kinds of fun ideas, great ideas to really enjoy and make those living spaces you call home, inside and outside, more fun, more you, more inviting, more efficient, more everything. So whether you're right now headed to, let's say, your local hardware store or a big box store, maybe you're doing a little antique shopping, looking for that little something to fix up something, or maybe you just have that big dream ahead. You're at the computer thinking, what should you do next? You're at the right place. We're going to fill you with so many ideas. The number you want to keep handy is 888-KFWB-980, 888-539-2980. It's that easy. So coming up on the show today, still in the heat of summer, although today it really does feel kind of nice, kind of crisp, as Seth was saying. Feels nice. But, it's still a lot of time to spend outdoors, luckily for us in Southern California. How is that outdoor space of yours holding up? Many of the new trends and the secrets to landscaping are to be discovered. Are you adding landscape lights that are not only lighting the garden and the pathway, but your house in just the right place? Or have you set up that outdoor living room so it feels like a room that you'd see inside, but it's outside? And what are some of those plants you should consider that will bloom not just during the summer or the spring, but how about each and every day of the year? And maybe you're struggling with a landscape challenge. This is your chance to get some of those questions answered today. So keep that number handy. I'm going to be talking in just a moment with a very great top landscape professional. I guess you could say he's on the cutting edge of gardening. We'll find out from him all the great secrets, all right? And then a little bit later, in terms of breaking the mold and making some trends, designers have been competing on this show that's been so popular on HGTV, Design Star. This is their 5th season. And just this week, they named the new winner. It was so exciting. Emily Henderson is her name, and she's going to be here in the studio momentarily to talk about that whole process and her whole design philosophy, and most importantly, how we can kind of pick her brain and incorporate some of those things from her approach to our own homes and in our own attempt to shop for things for our homes. So how cool is that? Now, before we get to my first guest, I have to tell you about something that was so fun yesterday. I always get to see some really neat things throughout the week that I want to share with you when it comes to home and garden trends and anything that's going on. And yesterday I got to see for several hours how they make and research and develop paint at the Bayer headquarters here in Southern California. So cool. It really is like a CSI lab. They have these chemists that are there. They're working on figuring out how is the paint doing now? What is the paint of the future? What goes into it? And then one of my favorite spots, they have this area, a professional painter, and his job is to test the paints in this application area and see how it can go wrong. He basically is trying to make something go wrong. And then if it doesn't, it's like, well, that paint's pretty darn good. They put it under all kinds of different conditions and pressure. So it's so interesting. And in the coming weeks, we're going to learn more about what happens to the paint that we get before we buy it. And then our next project in the inside and outside of our home. So very important stuff. Oh, and in recent weeks, we've talked about bed bugs. And how one way to avoid them on vacation, I know it's kind of creepy, but it's that whole thing at hotels and the hotel beds and, that hotel comforter thing. And, of course, one of our big tips is to not put your suitcase on the hotel bed, and definitely then not to put it on your bed when you come home because, well, bed bugs are hitchhikers, and they can just kind of move from housekeeping carts to luggage carts to, well, even through wall sockets. How gross. But I didn't think about this. Another place you really should be watching out for is Craigslist. Is Craigslist if you're thinking of buying some great furniture. All right, even if you're thinking of vintage upholstered items or previously owned bedding, how scary. You really want to make sure that something that belonged to someone else, if it has some kind of a fabric covering, that you have a bug expert who can inspect it for bed bugs and eggs, and that you just, that you do your due diligence, because you don't want that. The bed bugs are all over the news. It turns out that really, according to the National Pest Management Association, bed bugs have been jumping, pardon the pun, by 81% in the past 10 years. A lot of calls. And so do what you can to let's get those darn bed bugs out of our lives. All right, so let's head to the garden and my very first guest, who is here to help us about a very prettier thing, ways to make the outdoor living spaces look and feel like paradise.
I went to a garden party to reminisce with my old friends, a chance to share old memories, play a song.
And as we're talking about garden, you want to keep this number handy. Again, it's 888-KFWB 980, 888-539-2980. I know a lot of you always have gardening questions. And would you consider yourself a gardener or someone who wants to really nourish and nurture and work on that space that's outside? Or do you prefer to have someone else just kind of deal with it? Or do you have very little space and just long for that place to get into the garden, to get your hands dirty, to relax and unwind? One of my favorite gardeners who was on the show recently, I thought gave just the wisest tip, regardless of which area of gardening level you stand in, right? He said the first thing to do is to get a chair and just sit outside and just be quiet. And then just let nature and the relaxation and the quietness just kind of take you in. And I know that with a lot of us being busy, and working with the computer and keeping up on everything, you kind of go, I don't have enough time even for that. But it really is to be enjoyed. And with me is a guy whose family has been doing this since the 1920s. 3 generations of landscapers. David Snodgrass, emphasis on the grass. Welcome to the show, David. I love your name.
Hi, Cindy. Thank you very much for having me.
That is kind of coincidental that you are working on grass and your name and all, yeah? So you are a very important guy. You happen to be the president of a group called Planet, which is a national association of landscapers. And tell us a little more about that group and why we should care.
Yeah, I'm very fortunate to be the president of Planet. That's a professional land care network, and it's the nation's largest, or actually the National Association of Lawn and Landscape Contractors. And so there's about 3,500 companies, and if you total up all of the employees that we speak to, it ends up being about 500,000.
Wow. And so landscaping just the whole history of your family, I think is so interesting. And I have a great picture that you sent me that I have, I'm putting up on the website. It shows your family of landscapers. And tell us a little more about that family history and how that really is truly in your DNA.
Yeah, it started a long time ago. My grandfather, 1927, during the Depression, he was a one-man company with a mowing business, and he would take care of yards in the neighborhood. And his wife, Florence, had 3.5 acres right in the center of town, and she was starting a rhododendron nursery. And so he was supporting her getting that started. Once the rhododendron nursery was supporting itself, then he moved over full-time into the nursery business. And then my dad, Robert Snodgrass, married their daughter and took over that business, and then had a family of 7. First names all started with a D, and started the 7 Ds garden centers and landscaping.
That's great. And what I love about that story, too, because it just shows how the trends in landscaping just kind of keep repeating themselves, don't you think? And one of the trends that really started with your family and others that have been doing this forever is how it's all about families and being connected outside. And now, especially with the economy, younger families, people of all ages are realizing, you know what, this isn't just something that you do when you're retired. This isn't just for those other people who have a quote unquote green thumb. I mean, being in the garden and learning and loving landscaping is for everybody.
Yeah, I guess I was real fortunate to grow up in the business, and it gets in your blood, and it does pass from generation to generation. So if you look at landscape contractors or people in the green industry, it's usually a family business. So it just has a real friendly, warm feel to the business side of it, and it's also in the green business. Which also has a soft side, and it attracts great people. In fact, gardening is America's #1 hobby.
Yeah,
so.
Right. Well, when we come back, David, we want to talk about the changes and in the trends that you've seen over the decades and what trends we should be thinking about right now to make that garden, that little veggie area, that little victory garden, maybe just that outdoor living space, brighter, more enjoyable, more livable, all that. This is Home Wizards. I'm Cindy Doyle. We're back right after this.
Someone warned them from below till the rain comes tumbling.